We're on that path. Let's get it done. So I'm going to stop there and take some questions. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Governor. This question is from Tom Barrett. When is Phase 2 of the Blue Water Bridge project going to be funded, and when will it be implemented so we can build our new facility and provide some badly needed jobs for this area?
That's a great question. And if you want to know something on a side note, I bet the legislators love this. They get to come ask me a bunch of questions. Instead of me giving them more to do, they get to ask me to do stuff. So that's a good deal. In terms of the Blue Water Bridge, that's a project that's had a long history and not a very good history in terms of how that situation's been handled at the federal level. So what I would say is there's been a lot of good discussion that now it's been redefined as a project that I think is a very meaningful, good project that can make a positive difference to the community, that we're having those discussions now with the people in Washington, with the Customs and Border Patrol people, but I want to give Candace Miller credit. She's been great about being part of this. But we are escalating to Homeland Security, and actually I've talked to people in the White House about this issue. We need to keep pushing ahead on working through an arrangement, an agreement with the federal government so we can move forward with this project. And that's something I hope to see progress happening this year on in terms of saying, let's get some commitments, let's understand what they're willing to do, not willing to do. If they're not willing to do it, how can we be creative to find out how we can still get it done? And invest in the community, invest in this bridge. Because this bridge is critically important to you. It's critically important to all of Michigan and our country. It's the second busiest commercial crossing in the country, the fourth busiest passenger crossing. It's not working the way it should today. And so we're going to work hard to get that resolved this year in terms of getting answers that we can move forward on.
Thank you, Governor. Two-part question. What kind of a future do you see for light rail transit in Michigan? The other question is, how does your administration working to strike a balance between free trade and tourism with Ontario and Homeland Security?
Yeah, well, with respect to light rail is a really interesting opportunity. The way I look at it is I put on my private sector hat to say it has to make sense financially. And one of the projects that I'm actively working right now is what's called the M1 project in downtown Detroit. The good part about that project is being led by the private sector, and it's being redefined as a smaller system than it was originally, which I was challenged to see how it could go all the way to 8 Mile. But it's a great opportunity because one of the things light rail can do when it's done economically efficiently is to really encourage young people to move into the downtown area of a community, and to really create that attraction to say it's a live-work area where people can be successful in. Because that's one of the good things going on in Detroit, for example. We hear a lot of negative things on Detroit, but most people don't know that rental occupancy in downtown and midtown Detroit is about 95%. Because young people are moving into the city. And I'm excited to be touring around here later to see lofts going in downtown here. Because that's part of that quality of life thing for young people. Now, with respect to the second part of the question on free trade in Canada, I'm very much looking to Canada to be a bigger partner with the United States. I don't know if you've heard, there's another bridge project where I've been trying to work with the Canadians in partnership. But one of the things we need to do gets back to the first question about how do we work with Customs and Border Patrol and the U.S. government to really make it easier to go back and forth across the border. That's something we need to do a better job of. And that's something I have had dialogue for every border crossing in Michigan, is to say, how do we work to get better communication about expediting crossing? And how can we leverage technology or more resources to make that happen better? Because the easier it is to cross the border, the more commerce we can do, the better the partnership there is. Because one thing I like to remind people is if you pull out a map of the United States, it's amazing. We get excited because we see the Great Lakes, but if you're a logistics person, you see a peninsula. Being a peninsula is not a good thing from a logistical point of view. It means you're not going anywhere when you're in the peninsulas. Now, if you pull out a map of North America and you draw a circle from Montreal to Chicago, we're a fifth of the North American economy. Actually, more than that, probably closer to a third if you draw that big circle. So our future is tied to Canada, really the corridor from Canada all through Chicago and beyond. And we're right in the middle of that corridor. So the real question is how do we make it as easy to go back and forth as possible?
Thank you. The next question. Is there going to be a cap placed on the unlimited expense of our auto no-fault insurance?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
The cap on unlimited auto insurance benefits. Are we looking at a cap?
Yeah, one of the challenges is we're trying to do some legislation on that topic. And the question is to keep no fault going, but to have it a more structured fashion. Because we do need to be sensitive about people that are injured in accidents to make sure you get good coverage. But our costs in our state are well beyond any other state. And I think the real question is how do we come up with a structure so it's not necessarily unlimited, it's not the dollar amount, but really the fee schedules and how fees get charged through that system. So there's a good dialogue going on between the insurance industry, the medical community, trying to work out a compromise to say how can we improve that system, because if we don't otherwise improve that system or do something, you're going to see continued auto insurance increases of a significant amount through the catastrophic claims fund. So we do need to make some improvements there, and that's something that we need to continue that dialogue and hopefully get something done this year to deal with that.
Senate Bill 930 was passed this past Tuesday. Number one, are you aware of the impact on small business? And the second part, if you favor small business, do you know that 31 stores will close and 250 people will lose their jobs?
Now, Senate Bill 930, somebody will have to tell me which bill is that.
Roll your own.
What's that?
Roll your own.
Oh, roll your own. In terms of looking at that, I haven't spent a lot of time on that particular issue in terms of looking at roll your own cigarettes and such. One of the questions is how do we understand healthcare costs, again, the medical costs of tobacco, and how do we make sure we're enforcing the laws appropriately, and how do we manage through that? So to be open with you, that's one I'm watching, but I haven't spent a lot of time and attention on. And when people ask me Senate bills, you wonder why I may not know them all memorized, is they're very prolific and they're doing very good work, but I signed 323 public acts last year. Somebody asked me about a public act. I said, other than 2 or 3, if you just ask me, I don't have all 323 memorized, but I know what the topics are. I'm a nerd, but not that good a nerd.
Okay, next question. Which education reform act do you feel will make our kids better learners and our teachers better teachers, assuming we're talking about the teachers who are already doing a great job?
Yeah, there's a number of pieces. I'm very excited, and I want to compliment Phil in particular. Phil was our leader in many respects on education reform in the legislature. He did a great job working on that. There are so many pieces of that, and there's not one answer, but one I'll highlight to you was one of the more recent ones I signed that I don't think people fully realize the possibilities of. And that was one that didn't get much attention. It was called dual enrollment. And what got me so excited about dual enrollment, because one of the challenges we have is our college costs have gotten very high. And that's something longer term we need to look at. We're trying to work with our universities about better managing their costs by best practice procedures. We should be looking at financial aid again in some capacity, but need focused primarily. But the last piece is this dual enrollment bill, which would allow somebody while in high school to also take classes that would count for college credit. Now think about that. By having them offered the right way, in many cases a student might be able to complete a half year, a year of college while they're still in high school. And then you look at the question of college costs and the ability to get out in the career, essentially they could drop their college costs by 25%. There's very few things that you could think of that could save more money, provide more opportunity than the opportunity to save an entire year. So that was one, that's just an illustration of so many good things. And we do have a lot of great teachers in our educational institutions. I do want to emphasize that. But what we need to do is get more resources to the teacher, more emphasis in the classroom, and better tools, particularly leveraging technology, online tools, to really make the classroom a more exciting environment for both students and teachers. And there are some very exciting things going on. I am really excited about some of the innovations we're starting to see in education. And Michigan, I can tell you, is near the front of many of those in terms of really flipping the classroom to make it so teachers are more empowered, students have the better opportunity to get better counseling and support and coaching from teachers.
Governor, you have been very aggressive regarding several issues. That's good. What are your plans to reform welfare and the fraud, et cetera? Does your state spend substantially more than we do on our crumbling roads?
Yeah, well, you had quite a range from welfare to roads. But that's good. I mean, they're important topics. But on the welfare front, fraud we do need to work on. And last year, we actually did an Inspector General feature between two departments that was supported by the legislature to spend more time and resources looking into abuses, because the system is being abused. At the same time, we need to understand we've had a very difficult economy, and there are people that do need help, hopefully for a temporary period of time. Because again, the goal isn't to have people on permanent welfare, but as people have tough times, we want to be supportive for people that really need it, and for people that are abusing it, they should get in trouble. And we should get them off the rolls, and we should do something about that. And we're working hard to do that. With respect to our infrastructure, this is one that is a big topic for next year, in my view, early next year. I started the discussion last year, but it's really the question about we need to invest more in our roads and bridges. And that's a tough topic because it talks about needing more revenue in government. So on the face of it, it's like, well, that's a really bad idea. Because one, there's a credibility issue to say government hasn't done the best job on knowing how to use your tax dollars, which is true. But the government we're putting in place is about customer service. The way I look at state government, the role of government is you're the customer, and we're here to serve you. And we're here not to spend your money, but to give you value for money. The simplest way I look at it is we're another shopping choice for you. And I know you don't feel that way when you get a tax bill. But in the big picture, that's the reality. The right answer is there a need for some government? Well, how much government? And you should be helping define with the legislators and everyone how much government you buy for public safety, for education, for infrastructure. And you should be buying an amount, so when you look at all your shopping choices and say, I've got food and everything else, that you feel good that you've bought the right amount and you've gotten something for your money. Now, on the infrastructure question, how many people here like our roads and bridges? Raise your hand. Oh, wow, we got 2 or 3. This is the first time I've seen this in 2 or 3 months that I had a hand or two go up, so I appreciate that. No one's happy generally. Now, the question is part of it is we're about 80% good to fair in our road system. If we don't do anything, that number's going to drop to be about 35, 36% in about 20 years. And by not investing $1 billion a year to $1.4 billion a year, I argue it's actually going to cost us more money. Because if you let a road go into disrepair, to poor, the amount of money you need to spend to bring that road back up is far more expensive. Even do the present value calculation. Put in interest rate. Do all the calculations. It's much like if you own a car. How many people have a car here that you've decided you never want to do an oil change on? Have you ever bought a vehicle that you said, I'm not going to change the oil? Why is that? Because you know the engine's going to seize up, and it's going to cost you a whole lot of money. It's not a whole lot different than saying we're not investing enough now. We're not essentially changing the oil right on our roads and bridges in our state. And if we don't get to the point of investing the right amount of money in a longer-term time frame over a 30-year period, it's going to cost us a whole lot more money. So let's look at being smart about it. Let's have a public discussion. Let's look at phasing it in over time. Let's talk through it all. But let's understand that government is not about a one-year time period. It's about doing the right thing over a 20 or 30-year time span. So that's something I ask you to think about.